Hey all, Mix RPD here. So we got a big one to go over here. We got 2 a.m. Wake Up Call, great singer-songwriter. I did her whole album, so go check her out on Spotify, on Bandcamp, 2 a.m. Wake Up Call. Go check her out on her website, 2amwakeupcall.com. So check out the new album, Dead City. Check out her old stuff, Mall Fantasy. And let's get into the breakdown here of her first single, CD Age. Let's have a listen. This starts the album off.
War to a world I just as soon forget.
Let's run down the outro, actually. I feel like that's a good intro to the song.
It's the end of the CDA.
So sort of a fun, up-tempo, pop-punk kind of thing. We'll hear the whole song, I'm sure. But let's get into it, because there's a lot to cover here. So first of all, I'll try to go from the back to the front or something like that, and hopefully that makes sense. So the whole mix is going through the SSL bus compressor here, so slow attack, fast release, and then it's hitting the ATR tape, and then a Pultec, boosting 60 hertz and 10 kilohertz. So the whole mix is going through that, so let's give these a bypass quickly.
Garage to the bedroom, from the bedroom to the internet. Stuck in parallax, nothing moving, nothing standing still.
So yeah, that's what's going on the whole mix, everything going through that. And then from there, we have the instrumental. I always have an instrumental bus, so all the instruments are going through here, unsurprisingly. And there is a Fairchild 670 compressor on all of the instruments. So you can see the needle's not moving here, but it's definitely compressing it. Don't let that fool you. And we're definitely getting a bump on the output, so it's coming up in level overall, but it's certainly making the instrumental more in your face and compressed, even though the needle isn't moving. And also providing a lot of color and good stuff to go with that as well. So now let's have a little look at the drums. So all of the drums are going to the drum bus. And on the drum bus here, we have another Pultec, again boosting some 60 and some 10 kilohertz. So we can hear this on and off. On. Then after the Pultec, the drums are going into a distressor here on 4:1 ratio with sort of a medium attack and release. So on. So that's the difference there. So let's take a look at some of the individual drum mics. So we have a single kick drum mic, and of course everything is going through the drum bus with the Pultec and the distressor on there. So on the SSL channel here, we have a boost at just below 3 kilohertz, about 5 decibels, cutting around 350, about 4 decibels, and boosting about 3 decibels, around 60 hertz. So pretty standard stuff. And then we're getting a bit of compression and a bit of gating on the dynamics section here. So let's try bypassing this dynamics section and hear the difference. So off. So just shaping it a little bit there, shortening it up. And let's bypass the whole plugin. So that's our first move. Then it's a bit of R bass. This plugin is not like EQ, so it's 53 hertz we're adding here, but it's not like adding it with EQ. It's more like something that tricks you into thinking there's more low end there than there is, but it's very effective. So on. So getting a bit more heft out of it. And I should mention also that I've duplicated this mic and then I've added a kick sample with the Trigger 2 plugin by Slate here. I knew I wasn't going to have to overprocess the actual kick mic itself because I could rely on the sample for some low end. So this is the sample. And this is the actual kick. And this is both together. So after the R bass on the kick microphone, we have a bit of EQ here. So again, cutting some lower mids, but a bit lower down this time. So let's give this a listen. So it's kind of like that, like dribbling a basketball kind of sound or something like that, which we didn't want. And then just putting a bit more point up at around 2.5. So that's the part of the kick that the ear identifies with. And then after that, just squeezing it together dynamically with the MV2. So bringing down the loud stuff and bringing up the quiet stuff, squishing it together. The kick sample has some similar processing with some R bass, a bit more sculpting EQ, pulling out some low mids, boosting some lows, boosting some top, and then just running through an API 550 on flat EQ. So then both the kick mic and the sample are going off to this kick bus here, and then we're just doing a little bit of work with the transient shaper here, reducing the sustain and increasing the punch. And then another SSL channel strip, just for a bit more compression to glue it together, and a little bit more EQ as well, pulling out a bunch of 400 this time. So if we bypass this EQ, kind of sounds ugly. Back in. So that's the kick, and of course the kick is panned directly down the center. The overheads didn't do anything to them, just panned them out because they sounded good. They sounded like a good capture of the drum kit, so we just went with it. Sounds like drums to me, right? So it's just going through the drum bus. And then I panned them out, but not super wide because I wanted the guitars to be out wide, the distorted guitars, so I was leaving room for that, and I wanted the drums a little bit more central, but with some width as well. So with the snare, we actually have two microphones, a top and a bottom. And at this point, I want to talk a little bit about phase. Uh-oh, everyone tunes out. So basically the concept is, if you have two microphones, this is a duplicate, so it's going to be the exact same, right? But if you have this microphone and this one, you want everything to be going in the same direction. So see, this is going up, so you want this going up as well. So with the snare, we actually have two microphones here. This one on top is a microphone on the top of the snare drum, and then this one below is a microphone below the snare drum looking up. So the problem here is that, as you can see this peak on the top mic is going up, while this peak on the bottom one is going down. So that means they're out of phase. What I did about that was, I see if this here, phase 180 degrees, I hit this here to flip it. So we can hear what it sounds like without this. Let's listen to these two microphones on their own. So I'm going to flip it back the way it came in. Hear how you lose the low end on the snare? And flip it back again. More body on the snare, right? So that's very important. I would have done some alignment adjustments here as well, because one mic was a bit earlier in time than the other, so the same thing, it'll cause cancellation in frequencies. And you want to get everything as aligned and in time and all going in the same direction at once for maximum push and energy and punch. So on the top snare, we have an SSL channel, boosting some top end into some compression and some gating, and a little bit of a high pass at about 52 hertz. And then we have some saturation and some R bass for a little bit of body. So let's listen to this with all these plugins on and off. So on.
Still, nothing matters, nothing ever
that's helping it to cut through the track. And we're sending off to this Music Club reverb here, this impulse response. So if I mute this reverb so it's on,
It's the end of the CD age.
and then we have a bottom snare mic as well. All right, so that's going with our top snare. And all we're doing on the bottom snare is a boost here in the mid-range. And as mentioned before, we're flipping the phase 180 degrees. And then similar to the kick, there's also a snare sample. All right, so we have our snare top. And we add our snare sample. And our snare bottom. And then with the reverb, that's the full picture. And on the snare sample, we're just doing a little bit of EQ here as well. So other than that, the drums are pretty straightforward. I think the hi-hat's panned left, the toms are panned out, the two tom mics are getting bussed together, and we're doing a little bit of EQ here. We're going into an SSL channel for a little bit of compression and high passing at 62 Hertz to not interfere with the kick. On the drums, we also have my parallel chain here of some light tube distortion, a bit of compression, a bit more distortion on the other end with the decapitator, and some MV2. But the parallel chain is just on there a touch. It's pretty quiet down there, minus 26 decibels. So onward from there, we have the bass guitar. So right away, I'm putting an 1176 on there, boosting the snot out of the input. So if we bypass this, let's put it in the track.
Nothing moving, nothing standing still.
And then there's some EQ here, boosting up some 350 Hertz, cutting a bit of 86 Hertz, and doing a bit of filtering on the bottom and the top end. It might seem crazy to cut out the bottom end of a bass guitar like this, but I really wanted the kick to be living down there. So if we put it in with the drums, see, it sort of completes the puzzle, right? And let's turn this off.
Holding something in your hands is on a burning page. It's the end of the CD age.
So it might seem crazy to high pass the bass guitar up to 80 Hertz almost, but I think you can hear in this part, if I turn this high pass off, how much the bass starts to step on the kick, right? Like I made the kick a lot bigger than it was, and I feel like that's the way it should be. The kick should be living on the bottom, and then the bass should be living above that. So we're just trying to keep it out of the way here. So listen to this. So on.
Stuck in parallel, swimming underwater at no rest. Anyway.
So it's like you're not really losing too much, you know, if anything, on the bass, and the little bit that you might be losing, you're gaining in clarity and definition on the kick drum. And also, I mean, not to criticize the player at all, 2AM's fantastic, but there is a little bit of low rumble from maybe like the low E string ringing a little bit. So that does help to take care of that too, because that will kill you in the mix, right? Putting that sort of gunk through, you know, all the compressors and everything, and the master bus. So then we're going off to the bass bus, and we're doing a big old boost here around 866 Hertz.
Standing still.
So that sounds like this. Then we're going into the Waves C4 multiband here and just compressing the low end some, but also boosting it up a bit, a decibel and a half. So it's constantly bringing up, like basically like shelving up the low end from 112 hertz down, but it's also compressing the low end. See?
The end of the CDH.
So if we bypass, you can hear a lot more rumble and sort of unnecessary low end build up on the bass without it. But this helps to control that and just make it more even. But because we're not compressing the high end, just the low end, it keeps it sounding a little bit more natural and not just completely squashing the life out of it. Next up is the SSL channel strip again, and we're boosting some even more 800 hertz into some compression here. So off. On. And then we have a series of 3 Pultecs here. So we have the Waves 1 boosting some 30 hertz. So let's hear this in solo. So on, off. And then after that, we even have the mid-range Pultec here doing some stuff. So let's bypass all of these. So this is with all 3 of these off, and then we're going to put them back on again.
We don't own a thing anymore. That's how we like it. Another piece of life to pay rent for. But holding something in your hands is on a
And then we have the Tube Tech here, keeping it in check. Probably hitting this a little harder than I normally do. Off.
coffee and for turnovers. How could anyone resist that laugh? Stuck.
So it's kind of sloppy in the mix without it. So this is just keeping it tight and sort of shaping it musically as well at the same time. Then we have the Waves API EQ on flat. See if we can hear a difference here. A little bit of distortion on. Just giving it a bit more edge to compete with the guitars. Some MV2 here to squash it together, key plugin. So on. Let's hear that in the mix.
In your hands is on a burning page. It's the end of the city age. Ages over ages and I'm done.
So I noticed the bass was very sort of in and out when I bypassed this MV2 plugin. So yeah, key plugin for bass and many other things. Then it's some more EQ and we're rolling off some top end and doing some control of the higher mids and boosting up some good old bass again because it was getting a little thin.
This battle that cannot be on.
So let's hear this. So that's where we want the bass living, around there, around 80, 90, 100 hertz instead of down 50, 60 hertz so much, because we want the kick down there. And then this is the more aggressive ranges up here. And then just a bit more multi-band compression here, some slight bit more control of the low end, and a bit of control of that high mid range as well. off. On. Just keeping it nice and tight. And then even a bit more EQ just to bring it out and send it home. 880 hertz. And a bit more 77 hertz down here. And a bit of a scoop around 100 hertz where the bass can tend to build up. The bass also has a parallel chain on it, which is this DBX 160. We're getting about 15 dB of compression there. And then we're cutting some of that sort of mid-range bite out of it at 715 hertz as well, just on the parallel chain. So if I take the parallel out, bass sounds like that. Back in.
Life preparing for, but holding something in your hands is on a burning page. It's the end of the season.
Okay, and then we're off to the guitars.